Good evening. We're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 18 this evening. 1 Samuel chapters 18 through 20. When I was younger, however you want to think of that, I was a very short kid for most of my childhood, and maybe you can't tell looking at me now, but even into high school, I was very, very short, and then, it was all in the summer, it just kind of grew 100 inches or whatever, but I used to be a very short person, and I was very scrawny. I know nobody can picture that. I was short, and I was scrawny, and I wore glasses, and I was very much every ounce of the word nerd when I was in school. Not really that much has changed. But you know what that made me, and it made many of us kind of a bullseye for bullies, didn't it? That's the kind of people that they look for. And I don't tell you that so that you feel bad for me or anything like that, but just to say that I can kind of sympathize when people sort of feel like they are a victim of something. And I know in my past I have had times when I just felt like the world was against me and everything was bad and that I was just the victim and it wasn't my fault at all, of course. It was always somebody else's fault. And that I can really sympathize with people who feel that way because I felt that way at times in my life. And when you look out at society today, it seems to me that people in general are treating the idea of being a victim, victimhood, as sort of how you belong. The more ways that you have been victimized by somebody, the more ways that you can show that you've had it harder and rougher and more difficult than everybody else, the more ways you can show that, the more of a voice you deserve to have, the more that you should be able to speak out. And somebody who hasn't experienced that shouldn't be able to speak out about it because they just can't know how hard it was for you. And so the victims are really, in our society, the ones who are celebrated. They're the ones who belong more than anybody else. Now in 1 Samuel 18 through 20, the Bible is going to give us a picture of a man who sees himself first and foremost as a victim. He has this sort of victim mindset. And then it's going to give us a picture of three other individuals of Jonathan and Michael. Those are Saul's children. And then of David. And they have what I call a do-right mindset. They want to do the right thing. They have a do-right mindset. And 1 Samuel 18 through 20 are going to compare and contrast Saul's victim mindset with David's do-right mindset, and then it just leaves it to you to answer the question, which one really is better? But it starts in chapter 18, 1 Samuel chapter 18, and we see that those who have a victim mindset, those who have this kind of idea, they end up treating other people, even those that are closest to them, they end up treating them as pawns. It starts really with David and Jonathan, and it tells us in verse 1 that after David defeated Goliath, Jonathan loved David. It says that he loved him so much, it was as if their souls were knit together. And that's kind of a beautiful thought when you think about friendship, that their souls would be knit together. It's the idea that they thought of themselves as so close that if something happened to Jonathan, David felt like it happened to him. Or if something happened to David, Jonathan felt like it had happened to him because they loved each other so much. And in fact, it is the very definition of friendship that Paul gives us in Romans chapter 12 and verse 15. In Romans chapter 12 and verse 15, he says, weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. That if it happens to any one of us, we all feel that we are so knit together that it happens to Betty, it happens to each one of us. It happens to Melanie, it happens to every one of us. And whether it's something bad that we mourn together, or it's something good that we rejoice together, that this is the truest and most noble form of friendship that the world could possibly know. And David and Jonathan share that. Jonathan loves David so much that he even gives him his armor and his weapons so that when David goes into battle, he has the absolute best to keep him safe, because he just wants to take care of his friend. Now that's how Jonathan feels about David. And we know that Saul likes having David around, And Saul starts sending, after his great victory over Goliath, he starts sending David out more and more to lead people into battle. And David has great success. Everything David does, we're told he does it wisely, and he has great success in every battle that he has. And so the people start to notice how successful David is. And so they begin to sing this song. And the song goes like this. It's, Saul has slain his thousands. That's pretty impressive. But David has slain his 10,000s. And so they begin to celebrate just how good David is at everything he does. And it makes Saul feel a little jealous. And you know, maybe we can sympathize with that, but I don't want to lose sight of Jonathan. Jonathan is Saul's son. Jonathan is the heir, technically speaking, to the throne that Saul is sitting on. And you know, it could have been perfectly possible for Jonathan to say, now wait a minute, it's my father's throne. I should be the next one. And all these people are praising David for what he's doing. Jonathan could have felt jealous about that, but he doesn't. Because if David has reason to rejoice, their souls are knit together. Jonathan feels like he has reason to rejoice. And so it's not inevitable that Saul feels this way. Jonathan shows us there was a better path. But Saul does. It says in verse 8, he felt very angry, and the song displeased him. And he said, they've ascribed to David 10,000s, and me only thousands. What more can he have but the kingdom? He felt that David was now a threat. And this is what happens to people who have a victim mindset. They begin to treat other people like pawns on a chess set. You know, the ones that are easiest to dispose of, the ones that are easiest to remove if they get in your way. Now go back to chapter 16. Chapter 16, and remember verse 21. Chapter 16 and verse 21. We're told that David came to Saul and stood before him, and Saul loved David greatly, and he became his armor bearer. Saul loved David, but it was not with the same kind of love that Jonathan had. Saul loved David because David was useful to him. And when David no longer seemed useful to Saul, Saul was done with David. That's what we're told, that anytime David has success, Saul gets stressed about it. He has one of those distressing spirits. And so David comes in, and he gets out his harp just like he always did. And he played the music to help calm Saul, and that used to work. But today, Saul picks up a spear, and he throws it at David, trying to kill him, trying to get rid of him. And so David flees, and he runs away, and we see what happened. Jealousy consumes Saul, and now he can't see the difference between right and wrong. We're told that David behaved wisely in everything that he did, and that Saul became more and more distressed. Now the second thing that we see is it's not just David who becomes a pawn, but Saul's own daughters become pawns to him in this game of trying to defeat David. He has two daughters that are mentioned starting in verse 17. The first one is a woman named Merab, his daughter named Merab, and so he says to himself, if I offer David the chance to marry my daughter, and I give him sort of a test, you know, if he can go and destroy some Philistines in order to prove that he's worthy to marry my daughter, then the Philistines will get rid of David for me, and we won't have David anymore. And so he tells David, he says, I would like you to be my son-in-law. And David says, I'm not sure that I'm really worth all that. You know, I'm not really sure that I should be. And so Saul tries to convince him, but in the end, he ends up giving Merab to somebody else. And then he finds out that his younger daughter, Michal, and I'm just going to warn you, I don't know why. Sometimes I call her Michal, and sometimes I call her Michal, and I don't know what she's supposed to be. So if I switch back and forth, you just know who I'm talking about here. But he has a younger daughter, Michal, and it says that she loves David, and she really loves him. And so he says, this is great, but not because she loves him, but because he thinks he can get the Philistines to kill him. And so he turns to his servants and he says, go and lie to David and tell him that I want him to be my son-in-law, so that he'll go and fight the Philistines, and they'll kill him, and I'll be done with David. And so the servants go, and they've become pawns to Saul. They go, and they tell his lie, and David believes them. And so he goes, and he fights the Philistines. But what's the problem with David? He's wise. He always has success. And so he succeeds, and Saul allows him to marry his daughter. Now, thankfully, his daughter actually wanted to be married to him, because we see this was never about his daughter. This was always about Saul and what he could get out of it. Michael loves, I see there it is. Michael loves him. Everybody loves David. Now that's chapter 18. And Saul and this victim mindset. It takes even those who are closest to you, and they just become pawns to be manipulated and moved around however you want, because you say, I deserve for this to be made right. Somebody has hurt me and I deserve these things, and someone else has to fix it. Contrast that with chapter 19. Chapter 19, we have a picture of the do-right mindset. And what we see in chapter 19 is, if you have the do-right mindset, then you will do what was right, even if you will do what was right, even if it's not what your family wants. You put right before what your family desires. It starts in chapter 19, and Saul is still dealing with this trouble of David, and so he goes to his son Jonathan. And I guess he assumes that Jonathan will be on his side. And he tells Jonathan and some of his servants, he says, I have been trying to kill David, and I'm not succeeding in doing this, but we have got to get rid of David. And so Jonathan, the first thing he does, he goes and tells David. He's not worried about protecting his father's reputation. He's worried about David's life. And so he goes and he warns him, and he says, I think my father is going to try to kill you. You need to hide. You need to get out of the way. And then I'll talk to my father and figure out what's going on. And so he goes back to Saul and he says, Dad, we can't do this. We can't kill David. And he says, because it's sin. He hasn't done anything wrong. He's innocent. It would be a sin to kill David. Jonathan is willing to stand up to his own father. Never mind that his father is a king. He's willing to stand up to his own father and say, if it's sin, we can't do it. Because he has a do-right mindset. And thankfully this time, Saul sees it. He sees the light. He says, what was I thinking? You're absolutely right. We're not going to kill David. But then, as time goes on, we see that David, verse 8 tells us there was war again. And so David has more success in battle. And David continues to be victorious. And so Saul, as always happens, he gets stressed about it. That distressing spirit comes on him. And so they call David in, and he plays the harp for Saul to help calm him down. But Saul is developing a new habit, right? This is his new hobby. He likes throwing spears at people. And so he picks up the spear, and he tries to kill David again, and David runs away, and this time he goes home to his wife, Michal. And there Saul sends servants, and he says, in the morning, when David gets up, kill him. Right? We're done with David. He's right back where he was before. Thankfully, Michal finds out about it. And so she tells David, she says, look, my dad is going to kill you if you're still here in the morning. You've got to get out. And so he lowers out of a window, and then she takes some kind of image and she puts it in the bed, just like teenagers do when they're trying to sneak out at night. You know, they put the hair on it and covers up the bed. And the next morning, the servants come in and they said, where is David? And she says, well, he's sick. He's just not feeling good today. All right, he's playing hooky from school. And so they go upstairs, and of course they figure it out. It doesn't take long to figure it out. And Saul calls her, and he says, how could you do this to me? You're my own daughter. How could you? And you know what she does? She lies. She says, well, he threatened me, and he said he'd kill me if I didn't let him escape. And I'm not saying that she was right to lie. I'm not saying that she should have lied to her father about this. Clearly, she's afraid. Clearly, this is a moment of weakness for her. But overall, what we can see is she wants to protect the innocent, even if it's not what her father wants. She wants to do what's right, even if those around her are, those who are important to her, those who are special in her life are saying that they would like to see this happen. And ultimately, what we see is that all along, it has been God that has been protecting David. When David flees that night, he goes to Samuel, and he finds where Samuel is. Perhaps he's looking for advice, maybe just a friendly face, but he's there with Samuel, and Saul finds out where he is, And so he starts sending people to him. And every time that they get up to where David is to kill him, they just lay down on the ground and start to prophesy. God compels them, I suppose, to lay down, and it's hard to get up and use your sword to kill someone if you're laying on the ground and prophesying. And so Saul himself goes, and when he gets there, the same thing happens to him. He just lays down on the ground and he prophesies, and God protects David even from his own king, Saul. You notice in verse 24, it says that there became a saying. And this is what they say at the end of verse 24. They say, "Is Saul also among the prophets?" And it's really kind of a sad thing to think about. This king, this man who should have so much honor and respect, but he has allowed this victim mindset to consume and to control him, so that now people mock him. To be among the prophets should be an honor. To be able to say that you can prophesy for God should be something that is a good thing, but they're saying it in a mocking way, because the only reason why he was prophesying was that's how God stopped him from doing the wrong thing. There's no glory and honor for him because he doesn't see the world the right way. He sees it through the lens of somebody has wronged me. I'm going to do whatever I can and use whoever I can to make it right to me. In chapter 20, we see, especially from Jonathan's perspective, but we see that the do-right mindset empowers victims. That's really what it does, because at the end of the day, the truth is, any person on earth could claim to be a victim in some way. Every one of us have had things happen to us that were wrong. Every one of us in this room, somebody has treated us unfairly at some point in our life. Every one of us could develop this victim mindset about ourselves, because the truth is, everybody has been wronged at some point in life. And sure, some have bigger stories or smaller stories, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Anybody can develop this mindset. But it's only those with the do-right mindset. It's only those people who, even though they could claim to be victims and to live that life, they are empowered to do otherwise. David is empowered to seek answers, even though he is being, you could say, victimized by King Saul. It opens in verse 1, and David flees from where Samuel is, and he goes to find Jonathan. He's empowered to find answers. He says, "What have I done? What is my iniquity? What is my sin before your father that he seeks my life?" If I've done something wrong, let's just set the record straight. If I have made a mistake, let me know what it is, and if death is what I deserve, that's fine. But he is empowered to find those answers. Jonathan tells him in verse 2, he says, "You've done nothing wrong." My father, in essence, is out of his mind, and I'm going to figure out how to make this right, he says. I'm going to figure out how to make this right. And so they make a plan. Jonathan is going to talk to his dad about this, and David is going to hide out in a field. And if things go well, he's going to take his servant, and he's going to tell his servant to shoot an arrow short of where David is, to say, "You can come on back." But if they don't go well, he's going to shoot his arrow beyond where David is, as a way of saying, "You've got to get out of here. You got to go." And so there's a big feast happening. And Saul knows that David is just going to come to this feast, and that's going to be his opportunity to finally get rid of David. But the first day of the feast comes, and Jonathan is there, but David is not. And Saul thinks, well, maybe he's sick or touched something that made him unclean. He'll be here tomorrow. And the second day comes, and as time goes on, he finally asks Jonathan, he says, "Where is David?" And Jonathan says, "I gave him permission to not be here. I told him it was fine if he didn't come to this feast." And Jonathan hasn't mentioned anything at all about his father's attempts to kill him. I didn't say, "I did it to protect him from you." He just says, "I gave him permission not to be here." And Saul just flips. He just loses it. And he's developed a really bad habit now. He picks up a spear and he tries to kill his own son. This is the heir to the throne as far as Saul is concerned. He tries to kill his own son because at this point it just doesn't matter who pays. Somebody, to the victim, somebody has got to pay. And I don't care if you did it or not. If you're in the way, it could be you. And he almost makes it sound like he's doing it for Jonathan. He says, if you notice there in verse 31, he says, as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, you shall not be established, nor your kingdom. Now therefore send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die. But Jonathan says, what has he done? He's innocent. It's wrong to kill an innocent person. Why should he die? And Saul just loses it. And so even Jonathan has become a pawn to his father. And now even Jonathan could claim to be a victim of his father's rage. But Jonathan doesn't have a victim mindset. He has a do-right mindset. He continues to feel empowered to protect David. And so he goes out and he shoots the arrow beyond where David is. He communicates to David, you have to go. You have to leave. And he saves David's life from the wickedness of Saul and his victim mindset. The victim mindset says, this is somebody else's fault. So somebody else has to fix it. Somebody, anybody has to pay. But the do-right mindset says, I trust God. I trust God that however this works out, whatever the consequences are, and there's a lot of consequences to what Saul has done. David can't be with his wife. He can't be with his best friend. He has to run into hiding. Relationships have been shattered and broken. There are a lot of consequences, but David says, the do-right mindset says, I trust God. He knows how to work this out. And so no matter what my family thinks about me, no matter what they say about me, no matter what they do to me, no matter what the people around me, if I'm the only one who can see the right thing and do it, I just do it anyway. Because I know, I believe, I trust God is going to work it out. And that's 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 17. In 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 17, Peter says, it is better, if you must, to suffer for doing good than for doing evil. David is suffering and he's done nothing wrong, but David knows God has it all under control. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think the difference is this. The victim mindset gives away the power to whatever it's afraid of. Saul is a king, but he is a powerless man because he is being ruled by his fears. Fear that David is going to take over his throne. Fear that, and remember, all this started because he wouldn't obey God. And we've yet to see him repent of all of that. He is ruled by his fears. The victim mindset gives away its power to whatever it is afraid of. And the do-right mindset trusts in the power of God and just does the right thing anyway. We are here to be a help to anyone who feels afraid, to anyone who feels that maybe they have been consumed by the victim mindset. God provides healing. He provides help. We can offer you prayers and counsel, whatever you need. We ask that you come forward now as we stand and as we sing.